Well, welcome everybody to the final session on the first day of our Northants virtual funding fair. Some of you may be just joining us for the first time, so I'll just do a little introduction to you. I'm Sean Silver. I'm part of the planning group for this funding fair, and I work in Kettering with groundwork, and I run Kettering Voluntary Network. These events and the funding presentations are being brought to you on behalf of the Northamptonshire Development Funding Workers Network. We get together periodically through the year, an informal group of funders and also advice agencies that support people around the sector variously, and also local councils that have funding programs. And many of you will know that we run funding fairs in Towcester, in Kettering, and at East Northants Council over the past few years, but we're now going virtual. So hopefully it's a good experience for you, and we're very grateful to all the funders who've come and supported us. The format is that for this session, Alex Rex from Northamptonshire Community Foundation, who's already done 2 presentations today, about the work of the foundation, is actually going to be more focused now around actually applying for funds and advice and advisory tips about what to do to look out for in making those applications. You're all on mute. There'd be a cacophony of noises and background sounds if you weren't. And then there'll be a Q&A session at the end. It's helpful if you can use the chat to type a question in, and Alex, I know, will do her best to respond to them as we go on. So without any more ado, Alex, over to you. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Sean. So I'm going to be doing a presentation for you guys about funding, so the hints and tips on applying for grants. These will be sort of general, so I know obviously people are going to be wanting to apply for funds from the Community Foundation, but also you've had fantastic presentations, I'm sure, from all the other different funders, you know, the lottery and Mick George, and for instance, so you're going to want to hear about how to apply and approach them as well. So the first thing, which I'm sure many of you do have these in place, but it's good to, just in case people don't have things in place, but just to sort of recognise that you have to be formed as a group, and you also have to have the right people around you if you want to set up an organisation that is going to apply for funding and also deliver projects. So the basic things are having a constitution and a governing document. So that's basically some rules that you are going to abide by as an organisation, and it'll also help you sort of pinpoint what you want to do as an aim. Then you also have to have some kind of team together. So you're going to have somebody who's going to act as a chair and a secretary and a treasurer, or if you want to, you know, if you don't want to necessarily give them those names, you don't have to, but somebody who's going to help you look after the financial side of things, somebody who's going to have an overall eye on the project and the work that you're delivering, and then somebody who's going to be helping you in your administration. So that could also mean in terms of your PR and marketing, because we all know that that's now a massive part of what voluntary groups have to do. And then you also have to have 2 signatories in your bank account as part of your anti-fraud, preventing fraud work. And then you also have to think about, within your planning of your projects, those questions which are always good to have in your head, which are who am I wanting to do this project for? So who are the beneficiaries? Why do they need this project? And why are we the right people to be doing it? When do we want to do it? Where are we going to do it? And how are we going to deliver that project? And then also the last question, thinking about how are you going to demonstrate the difference? So it's good to think about, when you have an idea in your head of a project, is how are you going to show the people who have funded you that you have made a difference? And it's not actually just the people who funded you, it's also being able to shout about it, about all the good work that you've done. And sometimes that might be in statistics, but otherwise it might be in a case study and a narrative of somebody's journey that you really helped as part of your project. So it's having those ideas in your head, but also the planning part when you're thinking about how can I get from being a group of people with an aim in mind to wanting to be able to go and apply for funding. So having an action plan. So thinking again about those questions that I mentioned. So having this acronym might help. So the T GROW exercise. So the topic. So what is the issue that you're having in your area, your community? So for instance, is it food poverty? Is it mental health and well-being? And then thinking about the goal. So what are you hoping to achieve? So you might, for instance, want to be able to increase the well-being of the people in your area. You might, for instance, want to reduce sort of the crime levels in your area. So if you've got a lot of antisocial behaviour, that might be an aim. So there's lots of different aims that you can have, but it's pinpointing it down to one that's achievable, and also sometimes it's good to think about if it's measurable as well in some way. And then the reality, so that is sort of checking in with where you are now. So what we mean by that is, do you have the right systems in place? So it could be, for instance, thinking about, okay, do I have access to a venue where I could hold this project? If I don't have access to a venue, do I know somebody or know an organisation which will help me? What funding do I have available to me now to cover things like admin costs, or do I need to incorporate that into my ask? Do I have the right staff to deliver this project, or the right volunteers with the right skills, or as part of this project, am I going to have to put in time for training? So it's evaluation where you are now to be able to go to the next step of what you want to deliver. And then options, so what are your possibilities? So again, that sort of ties in with where you are now. So thinking about, if you know you haven't got a venue, thinking about who you could ask, or if you are thinking of, if you are finding that you've got gaps in your group, thinking about, is there a possibility of a partnership? And also thinking about the possibilities of where you can go for funding. So doing some research about whether, is there a local fund in your area, or is it a project that you think you need to seek national funding for? And then the last one, the will, how committed are you? So that's, obviously we all know from being a part of community organisations that having sort of that determination and willpower to stick through it and to get a project off the ground can take a lot of resilience, because sometimes projects that you have in mind can take 6 months to a year to actually happen, because you've either got to find the funding or the other elements of delivering a project. So it's sort of having that determination and will to stick through, to be able to having taking something from an idea to an actual fully formed project. So the research. So how do you know that there is a need in your community, and can you evidence this? So there are many different ways of doing that. So obviously you can talk to your current beneficiaries. So if you might be talking to people that you currently work with, so whether that's a group of older people or you've got a youth club that you're working with, it's talking to them and finding out what they need, so involving them in the process. But then there's also other ways you can evidence it. So you've got that narrative from your beneficiaries, but you can also look at the stats and statistics. So lots of these data, sort of stats and things are available online to sort of help groups in Northamptonshire. If you go onto the NCF website, in the About section, we do have an area called Northamptonshire Insights, where we've got some reports on there whether it's some on child poverty and crime, other ones. We've also got hidden needs report, which again is looking at statistics and data about what are the priority needs. And it's a way of basically helping to back up your idea and your needs to the funder. So it's saying that you might have your narrative, your beneficiary feedback, but then you've also found some data and statistics to back it up. And having both is a great way of being able to evidence that need in your area. Also, it's finding out for your local research, can they obviously support that? And again, we've done some of that work for you, but if you look on your local council's website, they often have a lot of data and information on there as well. So again, have you spoken to the people the communities that you want to help? Is this what they need? Are you listening to them and getting their feedback? And again, that's linked to the hard and soft evidence that we talked about. So the data is sort of like the hard evidence, and your beneficiaries are sort of the soft anecdotal evidence that you can back things up. And there's also just checking, it's good to check in with your local infrastructure organisation about whether other groups already exist and are already doing this. And is it a case of you need to think about maybe doing some partnership work and learning from them? Or is it a case of that it's already happening and it's already being funded, and that you just need to help signpost your beneficiaries? So reading the guidance. So I know on obviously our NCF's website for all the grant pages, we have guidance on there, and I'm sure many other funders have got similar guidance documents that you can download and look at. It's really important that you read that thoroughly before applying to the fund. It's checking that you are eligible to apply. So every funder is going to be slightly different. So for instance, NCF, we're able to support CICs, that's community interest companies, as long as they're limited by guarantee. But for other funders, that's going to be different. So it's making sure that you are eligible. And also, does your project and your group match the criteria? So for instance, again, we've got funds that are geographically based. We've got funds that are based, that are eligible for younger people. We've got funds that are for older people, and it's making sure that you are applying to the right fund and you are not inadvertently wasting your time by filling an application out that you are just not eligible for. Also speak to the grants officers. So many funders will happily have a chat with you about your application, because nobody wants to waste their time again by writing an application that doesn't quite fit. So spending some time either by emailing the grants officer or giving them a call is going to help you understand that you're applying for the right reasons, and that you can make sure that you're getting across your project in the best way possible. We NCF, we also look at draft applications. Some funders do that as well, some don't, but often local infrastructure organisations are able to do that as well by having a look at some draft applications and helping you think about projects. Nobody's going to write it for you, but some people will be able to have a look at it and just give it a once over and give you some feedback. I think also the reviewing example case studies of funded activities is really great to help you understand what's been funded before. So it can give you some kind of scope about whether your project and an idea is in the right direction of the fund. That it's good to see what's been funded elsewhere, and it helps you it can help you spark ideas. If you're wanting to do something in your area but you're not 100% sure yet, looking at case studies and what has worked elsewhere is a really great thing to do. And the most important thing is not to shoehorn your project to fit a fund. You can, as a funder, the grant assessors can always spot a mile off if an idea has been shoehorned in. Obviously, we're happy to have innovative and new ways of addressing needs. But if a fund is for instance, let's say our youth social action fund that we've got, the I Will Fund, but somebody's doing a fund and it's about helping young people, but actually it's more about their mental health and well-being, then it's not going to get funded because it isn't fitting the guidance. It's not fitting what the project is for, which is youth social action. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad project, it just doesn't fit. And so it's making sure that you're matching up your project to the right fund that's available. And sometimes you can adapt things, but it's best not to shoehorn, because it's going to be wasting your time as a fundraiser, but also the funder's time as well. So planning your application. So it's making sure that the people who are involved know about the project. And that might be because the funder might want to get in contact with whoever's put down as the main contact. They might want to give them a call, they might want to email them to check over some things. So making sure that the main contact knows as much about the project as possible is a must. Also, having, planning it out as a draft, and then you can either, as I said, get the funder to have a look at it, a local infrastructure organisation to have a look at it, or another colleague to have another pair of eyes on it is really useful as well. Not assuming that the funder organisation will know your group or the track record is important to have in mind. So again, using NCF as an example, we have volunteer assessors, and then at the grants panel, that's made up of advisors, volunteer advisors from the community, but also our trustees. And some of the people who are going to be assessing your application and some of the people who are going to be on the grants panel won't necessarily know your organisation. And so explaining it as if it's somebody completely new who hasn't heard of you is the best way forward, rather than assuming that anybody reading it is going to know the ins and outs of your organisation or know your track record or your successes in the past. Is the best way forward. So using the space on the form well, and the more relevant information you can supply about the project, the better. We know that a lot of funders, we put in maximum word counts, and that's so that you are able to focus about what information is important to put down, and it helps obviously our assessors and the grants panel to sort of be able to read and take in the information. So rather than an application being over 10 pages, we try and make it over like maybe 3 pages, so that people can understand succinctly what you're saying. So it's making sure that you don't repeat yourself, making sure that you can, as it says, as much relevant information as possible. Making sure that you apply with plenty of time as well is a must. So for instance, having a look, when you look at the guidance for a fund, you'll see how long that grants timeline is. So for instance, from when the deadline for applications is, when the grants panel decisions will be, and then when you'll get your funding. So for other funders, it's going to be different. So I know with our grants panels, we have a grants deadline on the 7th of August, then our next panel is at the end of September. So you won't be awarded funds until the first week of October. So it's planning out, making sure that you've got plenty of time to know when you want your project to be, when you've got to get your funding in by. And it's making sure that you can meet those deadlines. So if you know your deadline is on the 7th of August, then it's making sure that you get your application in time, but also your supporting documents. And that can be things like getting copies of bank statements, it can be getting copies of policies, it could be getting a reference. So you need to give yourself time and other people time to get that information to you to submit. So telling people within 24 hours that they need to give you a copy of a bank statement is unlikely to happen. So make sure that you have got time dedicated to get the information across. Then it's describing the project, not what you want to achieve. So sometimes we'll get applications that come in and they say that they want to, they'll beautifully describe how that they want to increase well-being, or they want to reduce food poverty in their area, and they'll tell us all of the goals that they want to achieve, but they won't actually tell us how they're going to achieve it or what they want to do. So they won't say, oh, it's going to be a 6-week project where once a week we're getting 20 people together to do a yoga and meditation session. But they'll have told us about all of the goals it wants to achieve and not actually how they're going to do it. And again, it's thinking about, who am I doing it for? Why are we going to do it? When will it happen? Where will it happen? And how are we going to do it? So having a clear, creating a clear picture for the grant assessor and the grant panel is really important, to describe it and give it as much detail as possible, so that they can assess it and review it, because I'm sure many people are going to be having amazing, really worthy project ideas, but it's about communicating it in a way that the assessor and the grants panel can read it and understand it, rather than necessarily thinking about what goals you want to achieve. It's talking about how you're going to do it. So budgeting accurately. So again, this is sort of part of the, there we go, budget. So it's again looking at the research side of it. So when you're planning what your project is going to be, it's thinking about what those costs are. So researching if you're going to have to buy some equipment, researching how much that's going to cost. If you're thinking about having to employ a member of staff, again, it's thinking about what's that hourly rate going to be, how many hours are we going to be delivering, what's that going to cost. So making sure that the figures are researched and accurate as possible and not inflated, because by asking for more money, you're not necessarily going to get it. Because often people who are on the grants panel will have had either some experience with budgeting, whether it's a business or whether a business owner, or whether it's as a member of a volunteer organisation. So they can see if a figure has been inflated, and they can they know what's going to be sort of the rough costings of things. So being as accurate as possible and giving detail in the budget is really important. So supplying a detailed breakdown of figures helps them see that you've thought about it and planned it and researched it. So also that you can include obviously a wide range of themes within the budget. So you said there might be your operation costs, which are important. So as we were talking about, your staffing costs for somebody who's actually going to be leading on the project, but you can also include things like administration costs, things like marketing, also capital if you're having to buy equipment. And again, that's going to be within the guidance of a fund, is telling you how much you can put towards that. And so for some funds, they'll have a limit where they'll say 20% can go towards core costs for the project, or 20% can be spent on capital. So that's again another reason to have a look at the guidance. It's going to give you an idea of how much you can spend on those areas within the budget. So the amount of monies that you should apply for should cover all the costs of the activity, and including, as I said, the contributions of the overhead and administration. And don't underestimate the costings or set out an unrealistic wish list. And again, that's just going back to the researching and trying to be as accurate as possible, even though we know funders know that there might be changes to things, and that can be discussed later down the line if things change, but trying to, in the application itself, be as accurate as possible, and making sure that you've got appropriate systems in place financially. So again, having somebody who is overseeing that, having 2 bank signatories, having policies and procedures about handling finances are really important. So make sure that the information is easy to read and understand. So that means you don't have to put everything in capitals or lots of exclamation marks to emphasize a point. Make sure that, if you can put in paragraphs, that helps. Make sure that sentences are easy to read. And that's, again, why proofreading is really vital, is getting someone else to read it. There's a separate pair of eyes so that they can highlight to you if there's anything that is unclear. And again, if you aren't able to find somebody to do that, it's taking a step away from it for a few days, 24 hours, 48 hours, and then coming back to it with, with a clear head, so that you can see if there's any glaring mistakes. Because we all know when we're writing something and we're really in it, it's hard to spot that. And it's important as well to avoid abbreviations unless they're defined beforehand. As I said, the grants panel and the grants assessors, some are made up of voluntary people from outside organisations, community groups, some are our trustees. So not everybody is going to know the ins and outs of a food bank and what all the abbreviations mean, and not everybody is going to know the abbreviations that are used when working in a youth club or a sports group, because we are a funder that funds a wide range of projects. We are, I don't want to say a jack of all trades, but we fund a wide range of projects, so we're not going to necessarily know all the ins and outs. So being clear is great. So measuring impact, that's something that it's good to think about even before applying for funding, because having an idea of how you're going to demonstrate the difference that a project has made is important, because when you come to do your end of grant report, in whatever form that may be for a funder, there are going to be some things that they're going to want to see. So whether it's things like a case study, or whether it's going to be more outcome impact numbers, so how many beneficiaries benefited from the project, how many hours were put in, things like that. Having an idea of how you're going to be able to capture that data, capture that information is important before you set out, so that you don't, in 6 months down the line, have to fill out a report and suddenly are pulling your hair out because you haven't got anything and your beneficiaries have moved on and everybody's started on another project and you just don't have that information to hand, you don't have the receipts. So having that, thinking about that process early on is really important for your end of grant journey. So the monitoring about what systems you're going to put in place. So is it a questionnaire? Are you going to keep, obviously a lot of information can be anonymized because there is concerns about GDPR, but there are ways of doing things that you can, and you can be creative about it as well. I'm talking about, a questionnaire, which might seem quite formal, but it could also be, capturing a testimony from a beneficiary on a video on your phone, taking photos. It could be, obviously if you're working with young people, it could be using social media. There's lots of different ways that you can capture how beneficiaries have benefited and got the most out of your project. So it's thinking about, as we said before, the hard data and the soft data. So to sum up, so it's having the right people in place in your organisation, and I think also and part of that is utilising what you have around you. So if you can connect with your local infrastructure organisation, a lot of those organisations are able to help you find volunteers. A lot of those organisations are able to offer training. So if you're having people, if you've got people around you who are committed to your cause and want to help, then but don't necessarily have the skills at that time, they can gather those skills, or you can, local infrastructure organisations can help you find those people with those skills. So whether that's trustees or members of the committee. Having a clear idea about what you want to do is important, talking to other people and researching, and then read through the guidance and take advice from either the funders themselves or people who've gone through that journey before. Having somebody to proofread your applications and being able to get feedback before you do the final submitting. Making sure as well that you have a look at what supporting evidence the funder wants to see is really important as well. So where to find funding? Obviously we've got loads of national funders. So obviously here's a few. Some of them are obviously quite obvious ones, and you've heard even more today, I'm sure, and over the next few days. But there are pots of money with your local borough councils and district councils. Often local councillors have got some small pots of money that they're able to give out to community organisations, as well as, you know, local funders like ourselves and Mick George Community Fund. And it's also, I think, once you have some experience of writing applications, you know, don't be afraid to approach those national funders and start building a relationship with them. So you can apply for grants that are less than £10,000. So it doesn't have to be sort of a big scary 5-year plan that you're approaching the National Lottery with. It can be the beginnings of building up a relationship with them that you can then build upon before wanting to go with more ambitious, larger scale projects. And here's just some information. I know obviously a lot of community groups at the moment are struggling because of COVID-19. So these are some network funds that have been put together by the National Lottery, which I'm sure they'll probably talk about in the next up and coming days whenever they're coming to talk. But I thought I'd share these. So we've got some funds which are there specifically for homelessness. We've got some, we've got community-led organisations recovery scheme. So that's being led by Power to Change, but it's also involves lots of different organisations. It's for community-led organisations. They are particularly interested in BAME-led or BAME supporting, but it's not just BAME-led or just BAME supporting. But that's, I think that ranges from grants between £10,000 to £100,000 that you can apply for, depending on the size of your organisation. But that can really help, because I know a lot of people have suffered with not being able to hold fundraising events. So you've got the Community Justice Fund, and then the Social Enterprise Fund as well. So that's particularly for CICs, so community interest companies or CIOs. So they can apply for funding. And also the Barrow Cadbury Trust Support Fund, which is particularly for groups who are supporting migrants and refugees. So there's some funds that I think obviously people might be interested in right now because of where we are nationally. And finally, there's contact details. So how you can get in contact with myself, who's I'm the Programmes Officer, or my colleague Anthony, who's the Grants Coordinator, on our website. We do have on our website a Help for Groups page, which has template documents, so template constitution, template policies. We also have sort of like a frequently asked questions section as well about what groups are eligible, and we're here for groups to get in contact with us and ask us questions. You know, as always, we'll try and do our best to help you out. So, question on where on the website will I find the stats bit? So, if you go to the NCF website, which I believe is www.ncf.uk.com, then you go to the About section, and then in the About section, you'll see something that says Northamptonshire Insights. And in the Northamptonshire Insights is where you will find our
Oh, Alex, I think we've just lost sound with you. Can you hear me? Can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're back.
Okay. Sorry, where did I cut off?
It's difficult to know exactly. just a couple of sentences ago.
Yeah, so just local insights, Northamptonshire Insights on the website.
Yeah, cool. So there's a few other questions there on the chat. Marcia asks, is there an example of a completed funding application on your website?
No, we don't have an example. That's something I'm going to write that down, so that might be useful.
Good question, Marcia.
Yes. We don't have an example one, and sadly we can't, obviously because of data protection, we can't share ones. But we can, as I said, look at draft applications. So even if you sort of just roughly had to go an application, then we can help you sort of flesh it out.
Yes, as can us at the infrastructure organisations, whether it's in every district area's got their support service in Kettering, Daventry, East Northants, Northampton, South Northants. Yep, we're all around the place for you. Jerry asked, do you know where we can get a bank account set up at the moment? Most banks have stopped accepting applications. I know this is a challenging one. And also on this as well, when you've had two signatories down, they can't be related, can they, or living at the same address? So anything that you've seen around this?
I have to admit, I think a lot of new groups are setting up with I think maybe Metro, but yeah, it's part of a lot of groups are like this. Funders, have that because of just preventing grant fraud.
Yes.
And fraud prevention, because sadly the voluntary community sector and charities in general are very vulnerable to fraud. There have been examples of charities and community groups in Northamptonshire who a member of the trustees or a member of the committee board have defrauded their organisation. They have taken away funds, which is terrible to think. But obviously, because we all like to think that everybody is doing it for the right reasons, but sadly, some people aren't, and also some people hit hard times, and then there's a temptation to take the money. Yes. So we have to, obviously, you have to, as organisations, protect yourselves by having those policies and procedures in place and making sure that you've got two separate bank signatories, because obviously you want the money to go to the right places. So it is a bit of red tape that's difficult, but it's there for the right reasons.
Yeah, so not all banks will open community accounts. I know Lloyd's do. Corella, have you seen places that you recommend people to? Corella works at Daventry Volunteer Centre. Just need to unmute yourself. We can't hear you. Still on. Do you want to unmute?
Okay. Hello everybody. Yes, Nationwide Building Society. You might be able to use them, and sometimes your infrastructure organisation might be able to accept funds on your behalf and hold them for you and distribute them. So that's another possibility. Certainly, we do that. Daventry Volunteer Centre on occasion for people.
That's called being an accountable body, so that you would nominate another agency to be your accountable body. Unfortunately, Kettering Voluntary Network, we don't have the facility to be able to do that. But it's great if you do find a larger body, like at Daventry Volunteer Centre or another, that will be the recipient of your funds and hold it for you. Right, so just moving on the questions there. Pratima asks, just to be reminded where your policy templates are on the site, Alex.
Yeah, sure. So on our website, if you go to grants, actually, might be better if there we go. Let's share the screen. Let's use technology. Woo! Okay. So you've got our grants. So clicked on grants. Then there is this tab here in this section. And then here we've got help for groups. So as you can see, if we scroll down, we've got frequently asked questions. We've got our supporting documents. So if we click on that, so here we've got where you can download a form for your reference. We've got example constitutions and governing documents that you can download. And then we've also got a bank, obviously, information on child protection policy with an example. We've got where you can get your vulnerable adults policy and also your equality policy as well. So that's a nifty little, but then obviously, yeah, we've got information, for instance, friends of groups. So I've mentioned the last couple of presentations, we can't do statutory funding, but so for instance, if you go funding libraries has been a big issue, or funding for schools. But if you have a friends of group, so a friends of such and such library, or a friends of such and such school, then that as its own separate body could apply for funding.
Right. There's another question here from Marcia about if a group submits a funding application and it's unsuccessful, can they apply again at a later date?
Yeah, so you can apply again. I would probably say that if it's applying for the same project, that you should definitely get feedback. So we know, when I can only speak from our sort of processes, that when we send a decline letter, we'll tell you why it's been declined, and we'll give you a brief reason about why that's happened. But you are more than welcome to get back in touch with us to get some further detail on why the application didn't go through and how you can improve it. So I would urge you taking up that opportunity with whatever funder you apply to.
Okay, cool. Any other questions from anybody? Don't have to be. It's been a very full conversation. So just before we close then, just to remind you, and myself and Alison, who's my co-host on other sessions, just reminding everybody about the Funding Central website, which has got funding advice run by NCBO, free to smaller organisations. If you've got a turnover up to 100k per year, then there's no cost to join. But otherwise, there's a subscription-based payment to be made, but that's always very helpful. So, okay. Well, thank you, everybody, for attending. And Alex, thank you so much for your support today, your third presentation. And I know that you're going to hopefully take a few days leave the rest of this week. So we wish you well with that. And thanks, everybody. I hope to see you on some other of these funding sessions that we'll be presenting to you. Okay, cheerio.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.